and welcome back to part 2 of chapter 19, where we're going to discuss actually the breathing parts. So, in the last half, we talked about, um, you know, um, all the parts involved and why they are built the way they are built, and what happens if you cough up lung clots. And now, this time, we're going to talk about the actual deed of breathing and why certain gases, when they enter our lungs, is really, 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 really bad for our health, like we discovered in World War One with the gas attacks and why they were so horrific. Um, because, it has everything to do with this and the breathing. So, breathing or ventilation is the movement of air from outside of your body into the bronchial tree and the alveoli. Now, the actions responsible for air movements are inspiration or inhalation and expiration or exhalation. So one inspiration following the expiration is a respiratory cycle. And that's going to come in a little later. So inspiration. So atmospheric pressure is the force that actually moves air into our lungs. At sea level, atmospheric pressure is about 760 milliliters of mercury. And when the respiratory muscles are at rest, atmospheric pressure and alveolar pressure are equal. Now, pressure and volume are inversely related, which is known as Boyle's law. And if you've taken any bit of chemistry, then you've probably seen all the gas laws, and we're probably beaten with them. If you haven't had chemistry yet, don't worry. You'll meet the gas laws when you take them. You take some chemistry because they're kind of like integral. So Boyle's law is one of them. So basically, pressure and volume are inversely related. So pressure over volume. If pressure in the lungs and the alveoli, or those interalveolar spaces, pressure decreases, atmospheric pressure pushes air into the airways. So in other words, when we have our diaphragm draw down, it actually decreases the pressure in our lungs, and because of this, air just naturally goes, oh, there's an imbalance, let's go in there, and it literally pulls air in for us. Isn't that insane? Yeah, so this occurs during resting, normal, quiet inspiration, as the phrenic nerves stimulate the diaphragm to contract downward. So literally, the lungs aren't really doing anything at this point. They're literally just being pulled down, which basically lowers the pressure, which makes the outside pressure higher, and therefore it wants to equalize, and therefore air goes rushing into our body. So yeah, if you've ever been in singing or choir or whatnot, or playing an instrument, like I used to march band in a high school and college, yay WCU. They always say, breathe from your diaphragm. Don't breathe from your lungs a lot, because you're concentrating and taking short, quick, deep breaths, and you want to pull in from down here from your diaphragm, because if you pull in from your diaphragm, you're centering down and you're breathing down here, and it pulls more air in, so that way you have more air to work with for singing and or doing instruments, wind instruments. So anyway, that's why they always say breathe from your diaphragm, because you're focusing more down here than when you try to breathe from your lungs up here. It's a mind trick anyway, but it helps you focus in on the right place to take a breath with when you're doing musical activities. Anyway, so volume of the thoracic cavity increases, which decreases the pressure from about 760 to 758. In response to the pressure difference, air rushes into the thoracic cavity, which if I was over in my lab, I would have grabbed the little I have it's a bell jar with two little pink balloons tied to a Y valve, and with a plastic part with a knob, and I can pull down, and it basically shows literally how pulling down on the plastic part at the bottom decreases the air pressure, and the two pink balloons, which represent the lungs inside the thoracic cage, actually start pulling in air. So just pulling the volume down on around it makes the lungs have less pressure, and therefore air goes rushing in to equalize that pressure, which is just insane to think about. I mean, that's just so freaking clever in my mind. What do you think, Monty? That's right, you only have one working lung. Anyway, So, expiration. So basically, forces responsible for normal resting expiration come from the elastic recoil of the lungs themselves and the abdominal organs. So tissues return to their original shape, and because of this, it pushes air out. And the surface tension within the alveoli themselves, because there's a lot of surface tension going on in your lungs. And that's something that, when they say, oh no, the lung has collapsed. Yeah, that means the surface tension was lost, and that's not good. It is not good. We need the surface tension. Surface tension, good. It keeps your lungs working. So anyway, so each of these factors increases to the interalveolar pressure about 1 millimeter mercury above atmospheric pressure, which then forces all the air out of the lungs. Normal quiet respiration is a passive process involving no muscle contraction. Forced when we like that does contain the intercostal and abdominal muscles forcing it out. So if you've ever had to do like the deep breaths and then you do the forcing it out, like I know divers do it sometimes, the free divers, that they get good deep breath before they go down. They'll do that to try and push as much out as possible so they can take in a lot at the end. But normal is literally a passive process. It's just literally everything in our body just going, our diaphragm, our lungs, the alveoli going back to normal from that stretch, and then it forces everything out. So we actually don't waste any energy kicking everything back out, which is actually, again, insanely clever. The only more clever thing I have ever seen when it comes to the respiratory system is horses. Horses' lungs are actually perfectly aligned to pump to bring air in and out as they run. It is absolutely matched to perfection, which is why horses can run and run and run and run and run. And that's why we love our horses, because their stride is actually completely matched up with how they breathe. So as they're running, it actually makes it easier for them to breathe, which to me is just like, wow. If that isn't the end all beat all of some setups that are just like perfect, I don't know what is. Although then there's other parts of your body, as I've mentioned in the past, that are just absolutely stupid. So, give or take. Anyway, that brings us to air volumes and capacities, which, if you were actually in the lab, I actually would give you a spirometer, and so that way you can breathe into it and figure out your own air volumes. Unfortunately, this is online, which, bummer, I can't send you your own so you can go and figure out your own air capacity. So, yeah, I let everybody figure theirs out in the lab, which is kind of cool. So anyway, measurement of air volumes is called spirometry, and there's 3 respiratory volumes. You get your tidal, your inspiratory reserve volume, and your expiratory reserve volume. So it can be measured with a spirometer, which is basically, it looks like this pipe, but with a big valve on the end, or a big round part that has a meter, a round visual device that showed with a thing that shows you, your volume when you breathe into it. Yeah, that thing. Anyway. And if I was not kicked out of the lab, because they're still waxing, I'd pull one out and show you, because, it's cool. I might actually sneak back into the lab next week and edit this video a little bit. So I might add some stuff onto the end of this video to show you the cool toy I have that kind of shows you the lungs and the spirometer. All right, anyway, so, however, the only thing that cannot be is the residual volume. So there you go. So tidal volume, inspiratory reserve, breathing in, vital capacity, kicking it back out again. Total lung capacity is basically, inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and expiratory reserve volume, and then residual volume, what's left over in your lungs. Because there is air that actually gets left over in your lungs. So speaking of that, let's go ahead and talk about this. Some air entering the respiratory tract during breathing does not reach functional alveoli. These are called dead spaces. And there's actually different types of dead spaces. So there's anatomic dead space, which is basically air and respiratory tract that remain in conduction structures that do not reach the alveoli. So, they're just hanging out going, wait, where was I supposed to go? Kind of like me after you give me directions to something. Alveolar dead space. which is air in the respiratory tract that reaches non-functional evoli. Now, we're going to talk about that because, yeah, on occasion you will, and as you get older, some evoli just stop working, which is bad for our breathing. So, and in some cases, we've forced them to stop working in bad ways. World War I. Anyway, so such evoli are associated with capillaries with poor blood flow. This occurs occasionally. I think everybody has, a couple maybe. Just happens. Things get worn out. Physiologic dead space. So this is the total of these two together. So if you just add the anatomic plus the alveolar dead space, then you get physiologic dead space. So again, anatomic usually equals physiologic dead space under normal circumstances, because usually all of our alveoli should be working. If they're not, you might have problems you might need to look into. All right, so then we've got alveolar ventilation. So you got minute ventilation, which is basically the volume of new atmosphere moved into the respiratory passage each minute. And then, you basically, so some of the new air in each breath remains in physiologic dead space. Another figure can be calculated, which is basically the ventilation rate, which is represent the actual amount of inhaled air that reaches the alveoli each minute. And that gives you some more math right down here. So the tidal volume minus our dead space, then multiplied by our breathing rate, and that gives you the alveolar ventilation rate. This, again, is the volume of air that reaches your alveoli each minute, and this is important because it basically tells you what your concentrations of oxygen and carbon dioxide are in the alveoli at any given time. So this one's kind of the important part, because this is actually telling you how much is reaching your actual parts of the lungs where we need the gas transfer to happen, and how much you're actually, using and kicking out and making sure everybody's working properly. So now, non-respiratory movements, which we do have. So air movements other than breathing can be called non-respiratory movements. So some clear the air passages in coughing and sneezing. So if you've just sneezed or you're coughing, guess what? You're doing a non-respiratory movement. Other emotions, like you're laughing your rear end off or crying because you just watched the sad part of a Pixar film. My family has a saying, it's "dang you, Pixar," because if me and my husband are such babies. We're such babies. We watch a Pixar movie and we cry our brains out at the sad parts. And so we have a saying, and we're all crying. And all three of us, me, Wesley, and Rhett, especially at the beginning of Up. Oh my God, that was just, ugh. Anyway, so yeah, dang you, Pixar, you made us have the feels. Anyway. You also usually results from reflexes, sometimes can be started voluntarily. Hiccuping is fun. Not really. I hate hiccups. I hate it when I get the hiccups. Don't you, Monty? Do you even get the hiccups? I don't think I've ever seen this snake with hiccups. I wonder if snakes can get hiccups. Woo. Anyway, now, under normal, breathing is a rhythmic and voluntary act that continues when a person is unconscious. Thankfully. God, could you imagine if we had to actually think about it? Whew. I'd be dead by now. Anyway, so respiratory muscles can also be controlled voluntary. So respiratory areas. We have groups of neurons in the brainstem that control breathing, initiate impulses that travel on cranial and spinal nerves, causing inspiration and expiration. This also can adjust the rate and depth of your breathing, especially like when we go into flight or flight responses. That's where we definitely, if we're in fight or flight response, it usually means it's time for your lungs to really get to work. So we actually we'll get into that in a minute. So basically your main brain areas that are controlling everything is your medullary respiratory center, which contains your ventral and dorsal respiratory groups, and your pontine respiratory group. So if you don't remember where the medullary and the pontine are, basically it's your brainstem. Your brainstem usually is in control of a lot of your involuntary areas. My old karate sensei used to call it your lizard brain, because it's actually one of the oldest parts of the brain if you look at it from an evolutionary standpoint. Not in you. I mean, it was all formed at the same time in you. But I'm just saying that type of the brain and those brain parts you can actually see in reptiles and further back on down the road that controls a lot of things without having to think about it. So that's why our brainstem is kind of like considered evolutionary-wise pretty old. Because it controls a lot of things for you. So you don't have, like Monty here, he's got the brain of a pea. Do you really think he thinks about breathing a lot? What do you think, Monty? Anyway, so a number of factors that affect the rate and depth of breathing. So partial pressure of oxygen, partial pressure of carbon dioxide, degree of stretch of lung tissue. Have you ever taken a breath that's a bit too and you could feel the stretch? So you actually have sensory receptors in your lungs to actually prevent you from stretching too far. Also, ribs get in the way too. Anyway, emotional state, because that can definitely affect how much you're breathing. Like if you're having a panic attack, and I hope you never have one, but if you've had one in the past, I feel you. That doesn't help with the breathing. Or if you're like hysterical, you're absolutely devastated about something and you're crying hysterically. Yeah, that doesn't help with the breathing either. So level of physical activity, which I need to increase mine. So receptors involved include mechanical receptors and central and peripheral chemoreceptors. Now this is actually going to play a part when we're going to be talking about next week when we start talking about the kidneys. Because the lungs and the kidneys actually control the acidity of your blood. So breathing and going to the bathroom are the two ways we actually control to make sure our blood isn't too acidic or basic. So this give or take of this beautiful dance of chemistry is coming up and is actually really interesting. So the lungs, breathing, and your kidneys control how acidic or basic your blood is. And we're going to get into this big time next week. Right. Anyway, so main controller factors are usually carbon dioxide and hydrogen ion concentration, which basically, if you remember, hydrogen ion concentration, if you have too much, it goes acidic. And if you don't have a lot, it goes basic. And remember, water is in between. It's H2O. So it's got an equal number of H's as OHs, because that's how it splits. If you split water, it's usually always going to be a hydrogen ion and a hydroxide ion. And now I'm thinking about my water, so I'm going to take a sip. Perfectly balanced H2Os. Anyway, so the more hydrogen ions you have in a liquid, it's acidic, and the more hydroxide ions, the OH, it becomes more basic. So, and both ends can be very dangerous. So, partial pressure. So in any mixture of gases, each gas contributes a portion to the total pressure. This is called partial pressure. So the amount pressure that each gas contributes to the total pressure is basically, again, proportional to the concentration. So what's the partial pressure of oxygen in atmospheric air? Keep in mind, air is actually not all oxygen. What we're breathing right now is actually mostly nitrogen. But we don't really pick up nitrogen through gas form. We actually just breathe it back out. It's just part of it. So our atmosphere is 21% oxygen. Therefore, it makes the pressure 760 millimeters per mercury, which is the number we've been talking about earlier when we're talking about, dumping the pressure in our lungs so the air flows in and, again, making everything go back to normal, which forces all the air out and breathing. So again, 0.21 times 760 millimeters per mercury equals about 160 millimeters of mercury partial pressure of oxygen, which is PO2. So there you go. So partial pressures is a method of referring to relative amounts of gases in a mixture instead of using like concentrations. Like it's 21%, which I don't know about you. I'm terrible at using fractions. I think in decimals. I mean, if somebody goes, well, what's 25% off this number? And I'm sitting there going, calculator on phone, tell me. Sorry, it's just been so long, and like, My grandmother was always getting annoyed at me. We'd be in the stores, and she'd quiz me on, well, if it's on sale, how much is this? I knew 50%. I could pretty much suss out 25%, but anything else, I'm sitting there going, I don't know. My brain doesn't work in fractions. My brain works in decimals. Thank you. Come again. This is why I'm not in math. Anyway. So, central chemoreceptors. It's in the ventral part or your medulla oblongata. Again, as my old karate sensei likes to say, the reptile part of your brain. And in the ventral part of the so I just said that. All right, mainly monitors pH in the brain. So low blood oxygen does not have a much effect because it really doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier very well. However, carbon dioxide crosses really easily. So yeah, the brain monitor doesn't monitor oxygen, which you'd think is kind of backwards. It's like, wait, isn't oxygen the more important of the two? You'd think, but oxygen doesn't play well, and therefore carbon dioxide does. So our brain-blood barrier is crossed by carbon dioxide, binds to oxygen, and produces our friend carbonic acid. No, that's not carbonic acid. Carbonic acid's the other way. This guy right here. Hold on. Having brain fart. Come with me, Monty. What? Bicarbonate. There you go. I knew I had a brain cell left. Anyway, that's bicarbonate. So bicarbonate disassociates, releases hydrogen ions, and these ions are then detected by the chemoreceptors. So it's crazy. And we're going to talk about this dance from carbon dioxide to bicarbonate, because when carbon dioxide dissolves into water, it always makes bicarbonate. And we actually, again, we're going to be talking about this particular piece with kidneys as well. So, and this dance of going from oxygen, back and forth, and carbon dioxide back and forth actually does this cool dance of going back and forth between acids and bases. And that's how we control a lot of the things in our body. Because remember, a lot of parts of our body is very, very dependent on the enzymes working there to keep everything going, and those enzymes are very, very sensitive to pH changes. So our blood pH is usually around 7.35. Next week I'll double check that. And so don't quote me on that right now. Next week I'll definitely tell you the numbers. But anyway, yeah. So the hydrogen concentration is directly linked to that of carbon dioxide, and these two substances are often thought of as equivalent concerning acidity. So increase in carbon dioxide or hydrogen ions in blood levels leads to increased alveolar ventilation, because your body goes, oh, whoa, we have too much carbon dioxide. Everything's getting way too basic in here, or way too acidic in here. So go ahead and let's breathe harder. And that's what you see when you're exercising really deeply. That's actually one of the things that's triggering you to exercise deeply, is not only because you're actually, you need more oxygen to get to the cells, mitochondria, to make more ATP to keep those muscles moving, but also this right here is there's an increase in carbon dioxide. Your blood's actually going a little bit acidic, and then you have to kick it, and then at your body, that's what your body's zeroing in on. Not that you need more oxygen, even though your body's screaming for it. It's actually the carbon dioxide in your blood and going, oh, whoa, we've got way too much carbon dioxide. Better increase those breaths, man. So it's kind of reversed from what you'd think. You'd think it's like, oh, God, it's because all my cells need oxygen. That's why I'm breathing so hard. And it's actually because your body's going, whoa, too much carbon dioxide buildup. Yeah, let's breathe harder and get that out. However, you can have the reverse, actually. You can have too little, and we'll talk about that. That's actually why when people hyperventilate, they put the paper bag over their face, because we need to actually get carbon dioxide back into the body because it's kicking too much out. We'll talk more about that next week. It's actually just a fun fact. So yes, there is something to people hyperventilating, and then somebody comes up with a brown paper bag, not a plastic bag, unless you just don't like that person, but a brown bag. It actually helps them capture and put carbon dioxide back in, which is actually will help them stop hyperventilating, which is actually kind of neat. All right, so again, peripheral chemoreceptors. These mainly change the senses in the partial pressure of oxygen. So here, like I said, the medulla oblongata, he works on detecting the carbon dioxide. These guys work on detecting oxygen. So in the carotid and carotid and aortic bodies, which are basically right in here. That's where it's attached. And again, it goes up to the medulla oblongata and tells him things as well. The carotid arteries right here, boop, boop, in your neck again. So anyway, so a decrease in partial pressure of oxygen causes an increase in breathing volume. This is where you'd think, yeah, okay, but what about oxygen? So yeah, it works one half on too much carbon dioxide, and this is not enough oxygen. So again, you're exercising and you're making you feel the burn, as they say, which makes me go, eh. But sometimes I like feeling the burn. Sometimes I do not enjoy feeling the burn, which is probably why I'm chubby. Oh well. But anyway, so a decrease causes an increase in breathing rate and tidal volume, leading to increased alveolar ventilation. So again, this does not cause a major response until the oxygen decreases to 50% of normal value. And then your body goes, yeah, dude, we're really down on oxygen and you need to do something about that. So yes, it is a dance between, again, carbon dioxide and oxygen, and going back and forth. So, inflation, which is called the Hering-Buer reflex, because I'm sure somebody named Hering and Buer figured it out. Anyway, so it helps regulate the depth of breathing as lung tissues stretch during inspiration. We actually have stretch receptors there, are stimulated, and these stretch receptors pretty much go up into the vagus nerve in our respiratory center and our brainstem, and as they travel, the duration of inspiratory bursts is then shortened, and this prevents the overinflation of lungs. So that's why we take those gasping breaths in a lot of occasions, because what's happening is this: your brainstem, your respiratory center, and your brainstem is going, dude, if we breathe too deeply, you're gonna hurt yourself and rupture something, yo. So shorten it, so we can get oxygen in, but which, like I said, in some places panting helps, in some places it doesn't. So, yeah, this just prevents overinflation of the lungs. So if you ever wonder why your lungs don't go, that's why. It's because of this reflex. You're overinflating lungs and whatnot. So anyway, remember, now we're getting back again to diffusion. And diffusion happens best over short distances. So, and the evoli are the sites of these very short distance for gas exchange. Microscopic air sacs at the ends of alveolar ducts, and these alveolar or alveoli pores may permit air to pass from one alveolus to another. So they actually do have pores, like I was mentioning last time. They actually do have holes. So when they're touching like this, so imagine these are two alveoli, they actually have holes, and so that way, if one's not, if one's at capacity doing the exchange, the other one can, whatever's left over flows in the next one. And there's a bunch of white blood cells, macrophages, running around in these to clean out anything. So if somebody's trying to slip through, like a Nazi virus, these guys are there usually to catch and clean them out and get rid of them. So again, if all the nose hair, mucus on the way in, and all that fun stuff doesn't get them, these guys try to get as much as they can. But remember, there's only so many of them, and if you're in a concentrated area, this is why covering your face with a face mask if you're sick, so you're not transmitting it to other people, is good. So anyway, most of the walls of an alveolus consist of simple layer of simple squamous epithelium. So again, barely any layers, because remember, diffusion works best over a short distance with very few barriers. We actually can diffuse without lungs. Amphibians do it all the time. They breathe through their skin. They have lungs, but their skin is actually more important than them breathing than their lungs. So that's actually kind of interesting. And we can do it too, but we'd have to wait for years. We'd literally be waiting. I mean, it does, oxygen does diffuse eventually, through our skull to our brain, but it doesn't happen fast enough because there's a lot of layers between the outside where the oxygen is and the inside where we need it. So that's why we have the lungs, to try and get rid of us waiting around forever for oxygen just to diffuse on over. Amphibians have that kind of time. We don't. So anyway, part of the wall of alveolus is made up of cells, type 2 cells that secrete pulmonary surfactant. So again, making those layers stick together so they act as one. So again, if they're acting like one, therefore less area for it to diffuse over. So again, gas exchange between the alveolar air and the blood occurs in the respiratory membrane, which consists of these structures. So the alveolar wall, which is right here, again, simple squamous, so it's literally just one layer of cells. Blood capillary, which again simple squamous, one layer of cells, and then a basement membrane in between to anchor it together. So, these thin layers make it so basically they're only going through 3 layers, and they're very thin. So therefore, it's really easy for oxygen to go in and be picked up, and carbon dioxide to be kicked out, and we breathe out. So again, why do we have the alveoli? Increased surface area. Also, because it's an area where we've reduced it to the point where there's only 3 layers between, and makes diffusion super efficient, while keeping all the structures in place. And this is why actually all of your alveoli, if you look at them, they're actually just like balls, look like they're balls covered in yarn, and the yarn happens to be your capillary beds. So unfortunately, this is where I talk about World War I a little bit, and why, gas attacks were just absolutely horrific. I mean, so what was happening is chlorine and mustard gas, what would happen is if you accidentally breathed it in, it pops your alveoli, like, a 9-year-old when you give them bubble paper. Or me, when you give me bubble wrap, because there's nothing more fun than sitting there and popping some bubble wrap on occasion. But unfortunately, the gas would come in, and because it wasn't a gas our body plays well with, it literally would pop our alveoli. Now, when the alveoli pop, it's not good, unlike with bubble wrap, it would actually rupture all the capillaries as well. So unfortunately, it would pop this, rupture this, because again, like I said, these 3 membranes are acting as one because of the pulmonary surfactant, where remember, surface tension, surface tension, surface tension. It would pop these 2. And then all of a sudden, blood would come gushing out of all the capillaries and fill up the lungs. So it would pop these, blood would come in, and you'd literally be drowning in your own blood. That's what would happen with chlorine gas. That's what happens with mustard gas. It pops your alveoli and makes you so you drown in your own blood, which is not cool at all. Because I don't know about you, I don't enjoy the thought of drowning in my own blood. Right? Monty? Where are you? Oh, there you are. Hi. I think that, is that right? Where's Monty? Oh, he's behind my arm. He's napping behind my arm again. Anyway, so, there you go. That's how it works. That's why World War I gas attacks are just, ugh. And that's also why you need to be very, very careful when water or a liquid hits bags of chlorine. That's why, honestly, they shouldn't be in bags. They need to be in buckets and stuff because, like in Walmart, I know I've seen Walmarts get evacuated all the time because somebody stupidly, dropped a liquid over in the pool area and it hit a bag of chlorine, and all of a sudden it went from chlorine that you can throw in your pool to chlorine gas, which makes your alveoli pop. And that's why they completely, get everybody out of the Walmart, evacuate the Walmart, so therefore nobody, and then they go in and they just blow it out. People with proper equipment go in and blow out the area so that way it airs out, and so nobody can get their lungs damaged. So yeah, chlorine bad. Okay. It is actually one of the reasons why we throw chlorine in ponds, because it actually is a chemical that, or not ponds, what am I saying? We don't throw chlorine in your ponds. Things are living in there. Throw it in your pools. There you go. Yes, our artificial our artificial ponds that we like in our some to jump in all summer long. The summer so far has been kind of nippy. Ugh. Anyway, I'm going off the rails again. So diffusion is the reason for breathing. So anyway, molecules diffuse from regions of higher concentration towards regions of lower concentration, as you can see right here. So air is coming in, and what's happening is the carbon dioxide is getting kicked out, and that primes the red blood cells to suck in oxygen because there's a ton of it coming in on this end, and therefore they're sucking it up. So again, diffusion is what's going on. So carbon dioxide diffuses out because there's not a lot in here. Because there's a ton of air in here. So remember, things like to go from high concentration to low concentration and our bodies take advantage of this all the time. So anyway, to determine direct diffusion of a substance, it's important to know the concentration gradient. In the process of respiration, gases diffuse from area of higher partial pressure to lower partial pressure. And respiratory membrane is thin, and gas exchange is very rapid. Again, that, like I said, distance, the less you have of it, the more diffusion is more efficient. So, several factors affect diffusion across the respiratory membrane. So, in other words, increased diffusion occurs with more surface area. Again, that's why we have all these bubbles, more surface area. Short distance, greater gas solubility, steeper partial pressure gradient. Decreased diffusion occurs from decreased surface area, but it can, which harms the respiratory membrane. So, stay out of the chlorine gas and other gases that are not good for you. Pure oxygen actually is. You can get pure oxygen treatments, which is actually kind of cool. There's these chambers you can go into and just take a nice nap, and it's pure oxygen. And apparently it's really helpful. Apparently Michael Jackson had his own personal oxygen tank, hyperbolic chamber to go into, hang out in there. I don't know why. I just thought of that. Because I'm filled with weird facts. Anyway. But there used to be oxygen bars where you literally, it was like a quick blip in like the early 2000s. You could go in, take a nice nap, and you could pay to get into an oxygen chamber, take a nap and pure oxygen, come back out. But the reason we don't use pure oxygen when we go down is because, unfortunately, oxygen can do some nasty things when it's under pressure. So we actually, when people live in deep dive areas, they actually breathe a mix of not pure oxygen, because pure oxygen is also extremely flammable. We lost 3 astronauts that way. When we were training and getting everything ready for the Apollo missions, we lost 3 astronauts in the most horrific way, and that was because they had a pure oxygen environment, and a wire frayed and sparked, and all 3 of them, they couldn't get the door open, and they all died. And NASA still hasn't really released the photos of that because it's just too horrific. They can't. To honor the families and to honor their lives, they're not putting them out there, and I don't blame them, because I've talked to people that have seen those photos, and they're just like, no, we can't do that. It's just too bad. It's just, anyway, so that's why when you're underwater, we don't use pure oxygen. We actually use a mix. One of the main mixes is helium. So that way, A, it's not flammable, and B, we're not, destroying our own with pure oxygen. You're like, but what's the difference between sleeping in the pure oxygen and hyperbaric chamber in those oxygen bars than, going down? Because pressure and oxygen don't play well. If you ever want to see what pressure does to humans under the water, look up the Byford dolphin accident. If you're let's just say this, if you have a strong stomach, because those pictures have been released. What happened is there was one of the biggest salaries you can ever get is going into deep sea welding. Deep sea welding is the most highest paid profession because it's so dangerous. Usually you only work for 6 months, and then you have 6 months off because you need that. So you go down on these 6-month rotations or couple months rotations down on these rigs, these oil rigs and whatnot, and you're kept at pressure. But people coming down and into the underwater area is very much pressurized. But when people are coming down or going back up after their month-long or several month-long shifts are done, there's a very delicate exchange, and the Byford dolphin incident happened where the pressure locks didn't lock properly, and when the pressure was released, with people coming in, let's just say 3 guys were asleep, and I hope they didn't feel a thing, because they were human spaghetti. Yeah, anyway, so like I said, Byford dolphin incident. If you got a strong stomach, feel free to look it up. But just giving you a fair warning, it's not pretty. And yeah, that pile of what looks like hamburger meat is actually human. Um, so anyway, yeah, pressure is, we use pressure, but pressure can be mean, especially with certain gases, and oxygen is one of them that just does not play well under pressure. And we've unfortunately found out the hard way several times. So that's why, one of the reasons why we have an oxygen helium mix. So again, when you're working down there, get used to talking in squeaky voices, because helium really does actually work very well under pressure. So that's one of the reasons why we use helium. But it makes everybody talk like this when they're down there, and that's okay because that's keeping them alive, even though we get the giggles. So there you go. And yeah, that's it for this week. I know it seems kind of short, but I gave you a little bit of a breathing week this week. And next week, we're going to jump back in. We're going to talk about the kidneys, and we're going to talk about the chemistry between breathing, kidneys, and how that makes an interesting dance. And I already touched on it a little bit in this section, but there's an interesting dance between between the acids and the bases in your blood, and we actually have a very fine window to keep it in that window. But it's an interesting dance of chemistry. So chemistry is coming back once again because we use it to keep ourselves alive. Yay! All right, enough of me rambling.
But I'm not done yet.
Uh-oh, I did it again. I completely forgot to talk about the aging bit of this chapter. Monty, why didn't you remind me?
Huh?
You don't care, do you?
What are we even talking about?
You know you're supposed to be able to remind me. Oh, now he's going in my hair. Silly snake. Tiny brain myself. Anyway, so lifespan changes reflect an accumulation of environmental influences and the effect of aging and in other organ systems, and the following changes may occur. Ciliated epithelial cells become fewer in number. Remember, the cilia also helps stir up the air, keep it warm. On top of that, filter out more bad things trying to come in. The cilia themselves become less active. So again, that means you become more, susceptible to respiratory viruses. Mucus thickens, which is bad. Swallowing, gagging, and coughing reflex is slow. Especially in certain conditions. Between the mucus thickening and the swallowing and the gagging, coughing reflexes not being at peak efficiency, that can lead to a whole lot of not so hot places when it comes to breathing. So macrophages in the lungs lose efficiency. So they're not doing as well as a job. Again, because of all this, increased susceptibility to respiratory infections. Breathing may require more effort as costal cartilage stiffens in, your rib cage, and your postures change. Like, unfortunately, my grandma, she's definitely shrinking, and she's unfortunately now developed a bit of a hunch. And because of that, when you're hunched, don't try it sometime. Just hunch over and try to take a deep breath while you're scrunched up like this. You can't do it as well as you can when you're sitting up fine. So if you're hunched over, you can't get a good deep breath. Connective tissue replaces muscles in the bronchioles. It hinders dilation, so you're not dilating correctly. Bronchial walls thin, so they don't open as much. Alveolar walls thin, and you may be going, wait, I thought thin is good. Yeah, but then they start merging, and because of this, when they merge, you don't have as much surface area, and because of this, you decreases your gas exchange areas. So them thinning and getting thinner and merging, that gives you less surface area. And remember, surface area means you can do more diffusion and whatnot in your body, because I keep harping on this over and over again. Anytime you see wiggles, anytime you see anything to increase surface area, it's because we're trying to absorb as much as possible to keep us peak capacity. We don't want the evoli to die or to merge, which then, again, makes your lungs less efficient and you're pulling in less oxygen. Yep. And then, like I said, I'm going to add on to this as soon as I can get back in my lab. I'm just going to record how the lungs work with my little toy, and well, it's not a toy. It probably costs a lot of money. They love charging us for our science things. And I'll show you a spirometer as well. So I'll be back in just a second showing you those two things. Okay, bye. Hello, I'm back in the lab, and I wanted to show you guys a couple of things that I promised last time when I was recording, so I'm going to add this to the end. Hi, Monty. He's here. Anyway, I want to show you the lung apparatus. So we're talking about lungs, and remember the pressure differential. So you have a hole here at the top, and it goes down into a wide tube that's connected to the two little pink balloons. And the pink balloons, of course, represent your lungs. And this would be your chest cavity, and this right here is your diaphragm. And you will notice that when I pull down on the diaphragm, I'm creating a pressure differential, and therefore I'm making a pressure differential inside the chest cavity, and because of that, oxygen or air will now go into the lungs and inflate the lungs. And this is basically how we inflate our lungs, by using our diaphragm. Pretty cool, huh? So anyway, I wanted to show you that. And the next thing I wanted to show you was the spirometer. So we have a bunch of these that if you were taking with us, you'd be doing this in the lab, actually using these. So this is a windmill type, and it actually tells you your vital capacity of your lungs. So in this case, what you do is you'd get a mouthpiece, you'd stick it on. This is a one-type use mouthpiece, and you see at the top there's a spinny thing. So what you're going to do is you're going to zero it out. You're going to move it to 0. And then usually what you do is you stand up. Let me stand up. Auntie's like, what? And then you go ahead and you pretty much take a breath. And sometimes you need to plug your nose too. We'll do it unofficially here. And you take a big breath and you blow. So let me do that again. So you blow as long, as hard, and as possible as you can. And I seem to be kind of cruddy in that my lung capacity is only, 2,500? So, yep. And that tells you cc's of how much your vital lung capacity is. So it's a quick way to figure out your vital lung capacity. So that is a windmill type spirometer. And I just wanted to show you that because I mentioned it in the lecture, and I didn't want to leave you going, she mentioned it, but so I just wanted to show you those cool things. Anyway, with that said, thank you so much, and I'll see you next week. Bye.